Well, Jill, welcome to Core Connections podcast. I am so excited to have you on today, and we have so many great things we're going to talk about. And I was like, Jill, we got to record, or we're just going to keep talking behind the scenes here. So,
That's
so
right.
many good things. So,
Thank you for
Jill,
having me.
course. So I want everyone to get to know more about you before we get into our topics today about kids' health and
Yes.
schools and all sorts of good stuff. So will you just share with
Yep.
everyone a little bit more about you and what sent you down this path of starting your amazing business, Rowe Casa Organics, and you're a mom of four and all that good stuff.
Yeah, sure. I'd love to tell that. Okay, so I grew up in a family that was very education minded. So both my parents had like a combo of 60 plus years in public education. So I was, a teacher's kid, kind of real familiar with the public school system. So anything we talk about today is not a knock on public schools. I just want to start with that because I love the school systems and I love people within the school systems. My parents were a big part of that. So, but yes, I have four children. Because my parents were both teachers and one was a principal, they used to tell me how hard of work that was. And so to do something different, so I did speech therapy. And that's what I chose. I was a speech therapist for 15 years and worked in with children. And so this is kind of where all of my story started, because not only did I have my own children, was building my own family, I was working with children all day long and I was a traveling speech therapist many of those years. So I would go in the schools and in the daycares even. So this, in my opinion, what we're going to discuss today starts earlier than just school age children. It starts in daycare. And so I worked with children and I began to be very concerned as I did that. And my heart would just break because the kids within the daycare system, school system, even seemed to be so unhealthy, so snotty. So they're always sick, always ailments, ADHD. I treated lots of different, diagnoses, I guess you could say, that I started realizing could be a culprit to some of the situations kids were living in. And then I would started going in homes even and seeing the same thing and just really got burdened, not only for my children's health, because I didn't know a lot about health, but I knew something was off enough to know that this can't be my way of life. Us running to the doctor every other week, and every kid I visit is just snotty and sick. And I'm like, I can't even make progress as a therapist because the child's just not well, and they're still at school. And, you can't miss every day of school for a snotty nose, right? So they're all just up there just snotting and just spreading the love. And so that's where this started, I think, in my mind, was just I loved children and I got burdened for children. And I had my own children to be concerned about, and they had health issues. And then I worked with children with health issues, and I was like, there has got to be a better way, right? So it sparked me. I'm a big Facebook gal and was scrolling one night, and a friend of mine posted a recipe of elderberry syrup. I had never heard of such a thing, but I was intrigued because I really respected this girl, knew she was pretty healthy, and went to college with her. And I just kind of saved it and thought, you know what? And it's so funny because I don't like to cook. It's not my thing. But I was like, I'm going to make elderberry syrup, right? And so I saved that recipe, ordered the ingredients, and I had actually went to look at my health food store locally to see if I could just buy it, because obviously I don't like to cook. But I knew enough about ingredients back then, even that to know that I didn't want what was in there, the artificial flavors, the high fructose corn syrup. I mean, you could find crazy things in elderberry syrup. And so I was like, I'm just going to make my own. So that's where this started. Is I ordered the ingredients. Of course, I worked for like 3 different companies. I also owned a tutoring company that we
Oh my
served
goodness.
children all over our community. So I had plenty of jobs. I did not need another side gig. This was not why I made elderberry syrup. I was literally, myself included, I was tired of being sick. And I was like, I don't know why I saw this recipe, and I don't even know what sparked me other than just God himself to just go make some elderberry syrup, given that I don't even cook. But I ordered the ingredients for some odd reason, and they sat on my kitchen table for a month or two before I did anything with them. I'm not gonna lie. And then I finally got motivated or had a spare Saturday. I don't even remember, but I just know I had time to make elderberry syrup, and I made a big pot of it. And because I am so all over Facebook, even then I would just post all my life on Facebook. I was a big poster. Well, I shared that I had made some elderberry syrup, and I was intrigued by the health benefits that I'm a big researcher. So um, I was really at night when kids go to bed, I'm always researching something. Like I just am intrigued with all things, that I can learn about. I want to learn everything. And so I had done enough research to see that there was something to this elderberry syrup recipe she had given me, and I was really excited to try it. So I did. I started taking it. My kids started taking it. I had chronic sinus infections, which, sounds minor compared to some health issues people get, but man, they were annoying. Yeah. I got chronic UTIs, and so I was and it was just antibiotic after antibiotic. And I just kind of prepared myself that every 2 or 3 months, I was going to need an antibiotic for something. And it was kind of the same way with my children at the time. And so I was just worn out. I was like, you know what? Yeah. I'm going to try elderberry syrup. That's just where I started. I posted it on Facebook. Look what I'm making. I was so proud of myself. And from there, people started really asking. It was just it sparked something within my community. I guess I wasn't the only one that was tired of being sick, come to find out. And they started asking questions, and I started taking it. And over a month or two of me taking it, I couldn't believe that I wasn't getting sick anymore. I was like, what is this magic? Okay, well, then I'm really telling Facebook all about it, right? I am like, y'all, I don't know what this is, but I have a few extra jars, and if y'all want some, here you go. Who wants it? And it started like that. Well, the demand immediately got so high that I had to do something with that. I had to get organized. I had a little clipboard that I would keep up with who ordered it. A lot of the children I worked with, their parents would order it. So I'd go to my speech therapy, drop off their elderberry. I would carry it in my little cooler. And my husband and I just started having these elderberry parties in our kitchen. And then it grew to having local pickups in our driveway because we had so many people wanting it. Once people started taking it, it was like, oh my gosh, what is this goodness that, it was changing lives. And then I think at some point I realized I'm onto something here. Maybe there's a better way. And what else can I make? Right? I need some lash serum because the lash serums are so toxic. And I was just having a big time in my little kitchen. And that's where it started. It was kind of an accident, and that's where Rowe Casa started. So, but it did. It's funny that we're having this conversation because my whole story started with a concern for the children, not just myself, and just having that experience working with children and in their environments that they're in daily really opened my eyes to the toxicity that they're exposed to at such a young age. And it moved me.
There's so much you said. And one thing I want to kind of mention from what you said is I feel so often things happen for a reason. And I feel sometimes we all need that reminder. Sometimes we think maybe you lose a job or something else shifts, or you start feeling guided to go in a different direction or do something else. And sometimes there's that fear that can come up with people, so an honor. I want to ask you this though, what was it when you were like, no, this is what I'm doing to help women who may have something, may not be making elderberry syrup, but something else.
Yes.
What was that piece where you're like, or was there the whole time you're like, no, this is exciting to me. I just want to keep going and see where it goes.
It just got to a place where whatever I made, people wanted. It was there had been I created some kind of a trust or something that people were like, this is it. This is my answer. And it was only because I knew what it was doing for me. And so I don't know. I honestly can't explain it. And it's a story that you just pinching yourself. Did this happen? Is this a dream? I don't even know exactly how it all happened. I think there were a lot of people tired of struggling, and it just was a God timing type of thing that he saw a need and saw somebody willing to make some elderberry is all I know. And maybe just used that moment to just grow
Yeah.
it into something that was so much bigger than I ever realized. Now, my
Yeah. Well,
sister, who is like my co-owner, she was already on her health journey. This was new to me. I was just sick of being sick, right? I kind
yeah.
of laughed at some of the things. When she would tell me to get rid of my false fragrance, I was like, girl, I am not getting rid of my scent seeds. Like, we have lost your mind. But eventually I came around and realized she was right. And yeah, well, now we get to do this together. So
Yeah,
that's
that's
really cool.
awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And everyone, I feel like it's a journey, right? And some people will look at me and
Yes.
think the stuff I do is crazy. They're like, I could never do the things you do. And it's like, yeah, but I didn't get here overnight. You didn't get there overnight. It's like these
No,
small changes. And I'm always reminding everybody, like, pick the one thing that you're going to work to improve on and then come back and you pick the next. So you're talking
absolutely.
about the Scentsy and the fragrances. Oh my goodness. Can
Yes.
we talk about that? I cannot. Like there are none of that in my house. Essential oils
Mm-hmm.
is it.
Mm-hmm.
So can you
Yes.
talk about why it is so important to kick all those chemical fragrances out the door? Like get rid of them today.
Well, we know that false fragrance is just an umbrella term. So it's in everything, anything cosmetic. Our cosmetic industry is a hot mess. It's completely unregulated. I don't ask always for more government involvement. Lord knows we don't need a lot of that, but we do need people to wake up and realize, hey, like I can think, I have a brain, and this is not good for me, right? And so that's what I push people to do. I'm like, don't depend on the government to make more rules, because who knows if they're I don't know if they're looking out for us. Or sometimes we all question that, are they really wanting us well? But it is our responsibility. And so false fragrance is, you got to look at the European nations, the people that are a little bit healthier than us, and what have they done? They've outlawed thousands of chemicals where we've outlawed 11, that are used in the fragrance and cosmetic industry. That's a problem,
It is
and so
it's a massive problem. And it's just like I was talking to my kids about this the other day, like with chemicals in foods and the fragrances. And it's like if we just match what they did in Europe, even if we didn't like they weren't even banned, but people just chose like, hey, we're gonna make
right.
better quality food and
Yes.
products, then
Yes.
everybody, even if you didn't change what you ate or what you put on your body, you'd be a little bit healthier because
Oh yeah.
all those things are so toxic and we don't think how toxic fragrances are. And it's like, I can't even stand when someone like walks by and you can smell they've just like sprayed themselves with all sorts
Yes.
of, and you're just like, oh, it gives you like that wave of feeling
I'm
nauseous
like
and
trying to get out of there as fast as I can. I'm like, things like that should be outlawed. I'm
yeah.
thinking this is a detriment to my health. Like this is a problem. So yeah, it's a lot of hidden chemicals. There are, some companies now out there that are still using false fragrance, but they're just a little more open with it. I appreciate that, but at the same time, I don't want it. I just think because it is not what God gave us to use. I don't think that it's super, super healthy. And I think the stats show that, and you can do any kind of little research and you're going to see all the long, long list of endocrine disruptors and the way our hormones are being imbalanced. And just get in the health world and you'll realize hormones in and of itself are a whole thing.
Oh yeah.
Infertility rates are skyrocketing in America, and it's a concern for sure.
It is absolutely concerned. Okay, so we have to talk about air quality in schools. And I
Step.
mean, this could be, schools, daycares, all of those types of buildings. I'm excited to talk about this because air quality matters and
Yes,
it doesn't get enough
yes,
attention at all.
it absolutely does matter, and I think that is something that so many of us don't pay attention to. When we go outdoors, we've got nature purifying our air. Although not all situations outdoor are pure. We've got nature working for us to do that. Indoors, though, without the proper ventilation, which is a problem in schools, you've got mold, you've got deferred maintenance. The list goes on and on, not to mention the toxic chemicals that I almost think our schools are clueless that they think they're doing something good by over sanitizing everything and using these toxic chemicals to clean everything, especially being that we've just gotten out of or I don't know, are we in it, out of it, the nationwide pandemic? I don't even know, but I just know that it got worse. And it was like sanitation. I was like, I have told everyone, I said, we have sanitized our way into it and the ultimate health crisis, in my opinion. And the schools were some of the worst because kids are closed in. They get very little outdoor time. The air quality is not good for so many reasons. And yeah, it's nice to have a chance to maybe, educate on some ways that you can improve that, because it is, you can just do a quick little search online and you can see all of the issues. I mean, there are, I saw several, the Environmental Protection Agency said that we have 57.5 million people walking through the school doors, whether that be students or employees of schools. And 28 to 29 million of those, are spending their days breathing in this polluted air. So meaning that's a lot of people sitting in toxic air for at least 6 hours a day. So
and not to mention, this could probably span to like a lot of buildings, not just schools in particular, but to focus on
it really could. It really
people that
can.
work in these environments. And one thing that always gets me, and it's a catch-22, because like our schools here in the Midwest, because it's cold, right, versus like California schools when we lived out there, they are tightly closed. And it would, to me, I'm just like, it would be nice that is there not a way to open up some windows in classrooms and allow fresh air?
That would be a start.
Important things. Yeah, we had that growing up out here, but because again, it's a catch-22, it's like they want the buildings to be super safe, but then with that comes this piece of, well, then the windows, there is no way to even open a window for any fresh air ever, anywhere, on any floor.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Especially with all the security measures people are having to take now too. It's like, I mean, my idea would be to open up a window, open up a door, have class outside. These days, I don't even know if you can do that. I mean, the public school system is probably in a little bit of a pickle right now when it comes to getting their air fresh. So I do think there are some things you can do.
Yeah. So Jill, let's talk about some of those things. And I know, well, I was just going to say one thing. So I know like our middle school, high schools here, they're newer buildings and they actually built courtyards in the middle. So it's like the safety piece and kids. So they do get outside some, but not near enough. And we know not only the air, but kids not getting sunlight, or adults too, anybody not getting that sunlight. Like, I don't know about you, but I try to get my kids, and like, especially when the weather's nicer, because we're going to be going into winter soon, and then it's just harder to even be outside. I'm like, get outside. You need to be getting fresh air. You need to be getting that sun. And it is just impossible for kids to get enough vitamin D from the sun when they're in school, in classrooms, in buildings.
Right. So that sun that regulates our hormones, that prepares our body to, be adaptive to the sun later in the day. We're not getting any of that unless we're outside more. I mean, being outdoors is so important. And schools are having
a hard time. Yeah.
Having a hard time.
So what are some of the things that as parents we can do for our kids, that are going to schools, daycares, in those buildings where we have little control on the actual air quality?
So what I personally do, just having kids, I've got we're going more the homeschool route as much as I can. I have one that's still there. My bonus kid is still in public school, and so when you have one that is in public school or any school, for that matter, not just public school, probably all schools, daycares even. I like to buy an air purifier for the classroom and donate it. I mean, you can't go wrong with that. So if you can't open a window, I know that, in the public schools, especially, they're having to teach to meet standards and, teach the test, what they have to do to meet all their goals as a teacher. So it's not like you can just go spend your day outside. That's really not a solution for those teachers. So the second best thing, in my opinion, is to have a really solid air purifier within the classroom that the child is in. Obviously, it's going to help the teacher too, because she's breathing the same air. But our children are fragile. Their immune systems are trying to find their way. And, I can remember going into a daycare to work. It was like a 2-year-old, and they were cleaning the walls with bleach, and they did that every week. And I just knew it was like this signature smell of this daycare. And I remember going in, and every time I would go in, I would just start to feel this tightness in my chest and like I couldn't breathe. And I thought, if it's doing this to me with a developed immune system, what is it doing to this little 2-year-old? But that is some of the stipulations and guidelines that lead the way in our daycares and schools. And that's if we don't do something like an air purifier, I mean, that seems extreme, but it's like, if we don't do something, they're being bombarded by all the stuff, like all the things. Yeah. It's almost a recipe for just a really unhealthy child if you don't do something. So that would be the first step I would take. I would grab me an air doctor and make it a donation. I would, always gift a lot of clean, like non-toxic cleaning supplies to my teachers, make sure there's no false fragrance. Obviously, Rowe Casa has a cleaning line, but we're not the only. I mean, you can use lots of different things. There's actually an EPA certified. A lot of schools have to use EPA certified cleaners. And so there's one called Pure Green 24 that I always recommend. That's EPA certified. It's has no scent, and the teachers can use that to not just sanitize toys and things, but they can use it to wipe down. You spray it, you let it sit, and then you wipe it down later. There's nothing toxic about it. It's been approved by the actual EPA, which is who monitors and decides what's allowed to be used in schools. So it means it's effective. It's been proven to be effective. So that would be something I would probably bring up to the school. It's hard because the teacher may be willing, may not be willing. I'm always I'm like, okay, when are superintendents, when are our leaders, our school boards, when are they going to wake up and realize that they could do something about this? It's not that there aren't options out there that schools could use legally. It's that the knowledge is not there. The education is not there. We're Lysol happy. We're spraying our kids down with Lysol when they walk in the door. I mean, you don't know what you don't know, Yeah,
so. You don't. Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to speak on the bleach piece for a minute. I think we think that like that smell is like, oh, it's clean. And yes, but kind of back to something you said earlier was about, we have gotten to a place where we have over cleaned things. And if we don't have germs and kids don't have exposure to germs, then their immune systems become more fragile and have a harder time kicking exposure and junk to things. And bleach, just because of my background with mold, most people don't realize this, is that they think, if there's any mold growing in anywhere, and this is the same for schools or homes or wherever, if you put bleach on it, it actually makes it worse. Those little, especially if it's black, like true black mold, toxic mold, it like actually causes the spores to like spew out. So now those spores, instead of actually having killed them, they are now out into that air, and then they filtrate through that entire building or house or whatever it is. And so we have to get away from these super extreme cleaning measures. Again, we want things to be clean, of course, because there's the whole, we go way back in history when people started just washing their hands with soap and water, people started getting healthier. But we have now taken it the extreme opposite of that. So in this whole like, oh,
Yes.
no germs. I always make me think of like, when the kids were little with their pacifiers, right? And
Uh-huh.
I was that mom that unless it fell on something really icky, but if it just fell on the ground, I just picked it up, make
Yeah.
sure there's like nothing
Yeah.
on
five
it, and
second
then put
rule.
it in their mouth. But I wasn't someone that like, oh, every time I had to go like wash it off really well or anything like
Yeah.
that. And it can help to build up those immune systems as like
Right.
that little bit of exposures here and there, and slowly building them up and
Yes.
not knocking their immune systems down with overly cleaning of things, especially
Yes. I
with our
mean,
toxic cleaners.
when you go this far in, usually I find that the answer is that usually the pendulum swings here and then it'll swing here. Before maybe we were real unclean. So maybe when now our pendulum has swung and now like everything's over sanitized, right? Because we're scared to death and
Mhm.
like, yeah, this is the answer to everything. Usually the answer is just somewhere right in the middle. Like you can
Yeah.
still be clean and not over sanitize yourself to the point where I mean, we're talking about antibiotic resistance now and
Yeah.
like all these new bacterias that don't respond to it. It is like it's it's an extreme that needs to be brought back into balance, in my
It does.
opinion. The
Mhm.
bleach, I was concerned after I did some studying before we were speaking today. I saw that bleach, when mixed with ammonium, which ammonium is in many other cleaning products, it actually creates this carcinogenic, what is it called? Chloroform.
Oh,
Chloroform
wow.
into the
I
air. It
didn't know that.
releases chloroform into the air. So I'm thinking, okay, if that would be like your Windex, your floor cleaners, your tile cleaners, bathroom cleaners, your disinfectants, Lysol being a big one. How many Lysol cans can you find in a daycare setting? You probably can't count that high. Okay. But they also are required to clean with bleach. Well, when bleach and ammonia mix, chloroform is formed, and that's linked to cancer of all sorts and infertility. And the list goes
Oh
on
my
and on.
goodness. Oh
So
my
yeah,
goodness.
this is a
Yeah.
real issue, and it starts young. This is our babies and 2-year-olds on up through school.
Mhm. Oh gosh, yes. So I know we've kind of talked about the over cleanliness, but we have to talk about hand sanitizers, Jill,
Yes,
because
we
I
do.
know you and I are on the same page. This is something I've always told my kids. I mean, I've homeschooled my kids some, and so we haven't had to deal with the school system some years, but also when they have been in there, I'm always that mom where I'm like, you nicely kindly ask your teacher, like, hey, can I just go to the bathroom and wash my hands with soap and water instead of using the, whatever hand sanitizers that are all over the walls or the teachers pass out.
Yes.
And it surprises me how many people don't know this. And this is strictly just, I think people don't understand
Right.
what that's doing to our body. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. Well, that's, from what I was reading and what I've researched, when you use any, obviously your skin is your largest organ. So anything that you use on your skin is being absorbed into your body. So you're not just sanitizing your hands, you're like all that antimicrobial stuff's going into your body. Again, we're talking about, antibiotic resistance is a whole thing now. But one thing that really stood out to me on the hand sanitizers. So I thought I had heard somewhere, so I needed to do some research today, but I thought I had heard triclosan was outlawed, right? Have you heard that? Triclosan's outlawed. We don't use that anymore. I was
I
like,
feel I'd have to do some digging, but I feel like it's sounding familiar.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, that's me. I
Yes.
was kind of like, I think I've heard that, but I'm not sure. I need to find out because triclosan is a real issue. Well, triclosan was the FDA did outlaw it in antibacterial soaps, and I think it was 2016. I have to go back and look,
So, but
but
are you finding it still in products?
it is still in hand sanitizers and most cosmetics. Okay. But they realized that it actually does not help. It actually may be causing more health issues, and it was not proven to be better for killing germs than just normal soap and water. Right. So they
Mhm.
outlawed
Yeah.
it.
Good.
And now they outlawed it, which is okay. Good job, FDA. Y'all don't get everything right, but you got that one right, I think. But they did it only in that in just antibacterial soaps. So it is
Oh,
not
not in anything
outlawed
else.
in hand sanitizers and all of these other products that we're using. So that doesn't make any sense to me. And now,
Mm.
since then, we've learned that triclosan is, a carcinogen. It is an endocrine disruptor. I can't say that right every time it comes out.
That's okay.
And then, and obviously just connected to all kinds of cancers and infertility. Infertility was a big one that stood out to me. The CDC actually measured the urine of 2,500 people, 6 and over, and they found triclosan in 75% of those people's urine. So that means 3 out of 4 people have likely been exposed to triclosan in their bodies, not just on
Oh,
their
for
skin.
sure.
Right. And that's
Yeah,
in our hand
well,
sanitizers, right?
yeah. Everything that's we
So,
put on our body and our hands is one of them goes into our system. And I think this is the
yes,
piece I just want to add into this and talk a little bit about our microbiome for a second, because
yes,
we get some people, it's easy to get fixated. I feel like there's a lot of dare I say, fear mongering and stuff out there for
yeah,
people to go do this or this, whatever that may be, leave it to you to fill in the blanks. But
right,
we have to remember that it's not always about killing the bad stuff. We want to
right.
support the good bacteria. I talk
Yes,
about this with my clients all the time and my students. It's
yes,
about, okay, when we're trying to get healthier or we're trying to, you know, just in preventative, right? It's about the
right,
terrain of our body, not just about what's there or not
yes,
there. And I like to give the example of, I could take 2 clients that say we do a stool test, and maybe they, and let's say we're looking for like, bugs. I use the blanketed term for,
yeah.
whatever, bacteria,
Mhm.
fungal, parasites, all that, right? And you could have both of them like come back with like the same stuff, but one person is really ill and the other person isn't, because the person that isn't has a more robust, healthy microbiome. And
Microbiome,
that's
yes,
that's that's in your,
gut.
obviously your GI, but also your
Mm-hmm.
skin, and all of that matters. And so we get so
Yes,
fixated on like these clean hands. And I'm always telling my kids, like, go play in the dirt more. And my kids are older now,
yes,
so it's silly,
yes,
but I'm like, literally, you need to be in the dirt more. And those of you
yes,
that have especially little kids that are putting their hands in their mouth, like make sure it's, well, if you can, clean dirt, because even
yes,
that's a whole other conversation. But it
yes.
is this whole, it's not just about like, when we think of hand cleanliness, it's like, it's not just like killing this, it's actually getting it off. And that's
Yeah,
why that soap and water
that
works
can
so
take you a
well.
long
And
way.
that'll take you a long way. And we don't need this killing agent, because again, it can be, because we absorb it in our hands, it can be actually
Right,
negatively affecting your microbiome, your kids' microbiome,
absolutely.
then knocking down the good stuff and leaving them more susceptible. So we got to focus on building
Yes,
up the good stuff, not just focus on
yes.
killing the bad. It's
That is
balance.
that is absolutely true. I mean, that's why our focus is always, what can we do for health? What can we build? How can we have a healthy gut? Because that's where all of health begins, is in our gut, right? And so if you're just killing off I mean, yay, you killed off all the bad, but you also killed off all the good. Like, that's not always good. Like, maybe there's a time in life twice a year that you might need to do something like that. But what's happening is, we are going in the mall, and every store we stop at, at the checkout counter, and then it's, to eat at a restaurant, and then it's, oh, I just feel like I need some, and it's, I mean, we're just, it is, again,
Mhm.
pendulum has swung too far. Not saying we don't need antibacterial stuff, but it's like,
Right.
whew, we're way over here and we need to come back into here. And I see that a lot in the health world. We're here and then we're here, and then when I find that happy balance, that seems to be where, true health is
Yeah.
found.
Very
So
true.
it's not that one side or the other is bad. It's just the extreme, pendulum swing that's getting us. And that is why I say we've sanitized ourselves into this health crisis, and especially in the
Mhm.
schools and daycares. And that's
Yeah.
and that's because kids' immune systems aren't fully cooked yet,
Yeah.
you know.
So, Jill, let's share with everyone listening, and we talked kind of about the air quality and air purifiers and things like that, but what are some other things that we can have our kids do to help boost up their immune system? Obviously, elderberry would be
Mm.
my first, because I like
Yeah.
that's your world. But also the
Uh-huh.
thing I would say too with elderberry, and feel free to chime in on this, is
Yeah.
everything I know about it is it can be best used when it's pulsed, right? So you take it for
Uh-huh.
a
Uh-huh.
period of time and then you take a break
Yes.
from it and then you take it again. So, you know,
I
we're
love
in
that. Yeah.
this, you know, especially as we're coming
Mm-hmm.
into the winter months, people tend to get more, or like I know we're kind of past kids getting into school. I always load my kids up with a little extra vitamin C and zinc and stuff like
Uh-huh.
that when we start school because I know you get so much more exposure to stuff. But what are some
Right.
other things that you like to do and recommend for kids to help boost up their immune function? So we're not always focused on killing the bad stuff. We want to
Right.
actually
What can
focus
we
on
do to boost?
boosting the good stuff.
Yes. So I mean, healthy supplementation, whatever that looks like for whoever's listening. Like for me, it was the elderberry. Sometimes I switch it out and take our antioxidant infusion. Obviously, I work with I'm post cancer, so I use a lot of different supplements depending on what my needs are for that time. Um, and so I just think healthy supplementation, but also look at what you're feeding your kids. Look at their sleep patterns. Taking your child out early morning and getting that early morning sun to set their circadian rhythms. Like those are all such important and almost free things, like the red dye 40, the high fructose corn syrup. I prefer, unless it's raw, to cut out some dairy, to watch the gluten. We don't do it perfectly, but just watch I've never in my life, I think kids are so sugared up these days. It is everything they eat, everything at the concession stands, at every event. And then our schools aren't helping because we're bringing in snow cone machines with all the dyes. Oh, but why does my kid have ADD and ADHD? And I get it, it can be a chemical thing, but I'm like, listen, your kid had red dye 40 all day at school.
Yeah.
No wonder. And got 20 minutes of movement. Of course your kid is struggling.
Yeah.
So we as parents need to be proactive. What are we packing in their lunches? Are we giving them enough protein, to keep them thriving, and enough fruits and vegetables? There's there's 1,000 ways you can do it, but you've got to do something. You can't afford to do nothing, right? As a parent.
Yeah.
But just pouring into sleep patterns, food, emotional wellness, always check in on that with your children. I mean, there's the list could go on and on, but you got to start
Yeah.
somewhere.
Well, those are key ones. And I think sugar and dyes are huge. And again, it's not
Yes.
about, well, the dyes, I would say kids can't have it all. I'm very anti
Yes,
it.
I
My
agree.
kids notice it when they've had something with dye. And
Yes.
I'm like, okay, look back at what you just had and how you performed at that
Right.
athletic event or how you felt. And they're like, oh, yeah, I really didn't feel good. Mom was right. But they don't want to admit it.
Yes.
But then they
Yes.
won't do it again. But the
Yes.
sugar, too, that people don't realize is when you eat sugar, it actually suppresses your immune function. So we
Absolutely.
have to think about and recognize those things. And sometimes I hear from parents, oh,
Mm-hmm.
it's too hard to change my kids' eating habits. It's like, well, but you have to start somewhere. I'm not saying you have to go cold
Yes.
turkey, and it's not like my kids will ever
Right.
eat things with sugar. It's
Right.
about watching what they are eating because it stacks really, really fast
Yeah.
if you aren't paying attention. It's just like
It
starting to
does.
slowly switch things out for them. So if you've got a picky eater, whatever it is, you just get creative, start doing some searching and be like, how can I start to shift? I never expect a parent to take a kid 180 overnight. Don't do that. Like
Yes.
you have to start with where
No.
you're at and make these
One step at a time.
little tiny changes. But yeah, the
Yes.
sugar, the dyes, the chemicals, those are the first ones that have to decrease those and what they're eating, focus. And again, just like what you said, Jill, get your kids to focus on eating more animal protein. It's going to fill them up. They're
Yes.
going to feel better. And
Yes.
then they're not going to be as hungry and good fats and things like that.
And
But
they
again,
can
there
balance
are,
that blood sugar that's probably trying to spike throughout the day. And I mean, it starts in daycares too. Like I know every day is somebody's birthday. So somebody's bringing in some cupcakes. I'm like, my kid does not need a cupcake every other day, with the icing and the red dye and the gluten and get a list of, I'm like, if it's my kid's birthday, guess what? I'm sending some watermelon with some candles in it. Like change the game. Like be the parent that changes the game. You know what? In my opinion, when you bring all that mess up there for the 2-year-olds to eat, you're, in my opinion, poisoning children. So I'm like, let's not do that. Let's change the game. Like, what's wrong with bringing some strawberries? put some candlesticks in there and call it a day. Like, I know it's their special day, but when it's somebody's birthday all the time, and you're always, and even as an adult, we're always celebrating something, right? If it's not Thanksgiving, it's Christmas, or if it's not that, it's Easter or Valentine's, and everything has just sugar, sugar, sugar. You gotta change the game, and sometimes that may make you the oddball out, but that's okay because I sleep so much better knowing that I fed those kids watermelon instead of all the other junk that I could have sent, Like it's a
Yeah.
good feeling. It's a good feeling to be different, you know?
It is. It is. And it has to be us starting and
Yes,
changing
somebody
that.
has to do it.
And I know so many times like, oh, well, then you have that feeling of like, but my kid will be singled out, or, you
I
feel like I'm the
know.
odd parent or whatever. But if you're passionate about health and all that, like you can be the person that elicits change. Like I even just say, because I'm a big fan, everyone that listens knows I'm a
Uh-huh,
huge fan
uh-huh.
of being gluten free and the power that it has, that I've seen it have on
Yeah.
adults, but especially kids with
Yes.
ADD or,
Yes.
eczema, all sorts of, if they've got health issues,
Mm-hmm.
the gluten needs to go, see what happens. It's amazing
Right.
to me what it can do for their system. But you have to be that person that's like, it's okay to be the leader. And even if you
Yes.
just look back 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and what you can buy in stores, and again, of course, as
Yeah.
much as possible, we don't want to eating too much processed food, but even
Right.
with that, like you can, like eating gluten free today, eating dairy free, like it just really is a lot easier because more people are
It
recognizing
is.
how they feel better. So it's like, just
Yes.
think of it in that perspective. And you, even in
Mm-hmm.
your small community, you can be that person that
Right.
helps to shift things forward. Maybe it means going to the grocery store and asking the manager to be like, hey, could you start carrying some of these other things,
Absolutely.
for kids? And again, we want to eat real food as much as possible, but the
Right.
processed stuff is
Yeah.
like hard
There
to
are some
avoid
better
sometimes.
things. Like if you want to celebrate, there are better options out there. It's just so many parents don't know that they're out there too. And I mean, yeah, I mean, I'm all about a nice little celebration, but it just in America, it's just gotten out of hand. And there's just we have to like find the boundary, and if you want to set your kid up to succeed, you're just going to have to say no and do things a little different sometimes, and that's okay. With my children, and especially my 10-year-old, he stands out to me because he's the one that's probably going to lean. He's going to bring home the Gatorade if it's a special day, and I'm like, I'm over here cringing, but I'm like, I'll say, Austin, can you look at that? Let's look at the label. And he knows how to read labels now, and he'll go, oh my gosh, it has 45 grams of sugar. And I'm like, look, do you see high fructose corn syrup on there? Yeah. And do you see, let's talk about the colors, because those are very, very dangerous for you. And he'll look, and all of a sudden that Gatorade doesn't look so good. I'm just taking all the joy out of everybody's life, right? But I mean, sometimes it just, and he'll come home with it, but he'll look at me and he'll go, yeah, this one's got way too much sugar. Like just
Mhm.
raising that awareness. Sometimes if your
Yeah.
child is struggling and you don't want to just completely take it away, take all
Yeah.
their joy away like I do, you know, you can at least educate them, get their minds thinking about labels and what's in it, and what is in, like not all food is safe. They need to be aware that it's not all going to help you feel good. And when you
Yeah.
get that tummy ache later, there could be a connection. So just letting them make that connection. Like I may let him go ahead and drink the Gatorade and be like, dude, when you don't feel good tonight, we'll talk then,
Yeah.
but
But
it's a
they
teaching
start to
opportunity. Yeah. They
absolutely,
start
they
to
start to
embrace that.
realize, it
My
is, it's
17-year-old's totally different. She's embraced it and she's
mhm.
getting her movement in every day. But it takes time for them to learn, especially for me. My kids were, my older two that are 17 and 20 now. I mean, they were, maybe 10 or 11 when I started this and really started kind of paying attention. And so it's like, okay, it's fine. I'm starting to see the end result is they start thinking about these things and realizing mom might not be crazy like we thought. She actually had
Yeah.
meaning to this. This actually is working, and I am tired of being sick.
Yeah.
And so they start to take it in as their own. And I think
Mhm.
as parents, we have that huge responsibility just, pique their interest, even if we're to take it all away, we can at
Yeah.
least pique their interest to learning
It's
and connecting
educating
the
them.
dots.
And then
Yeah, I
they
wish
start
my
to make
mom had
those
told me
decisions.
that the Kit Kats and yeah, I wish my mom. I was a college volleyball player, and I remember when I went off, I called home and I was like, I feel so dizzy during my practices. I am like dying during my practices. Mom, what is wrong? She was like, "What have you eaten today?" And I was like, "Well, I had some of those no bake sugar cookies you sent me, and I had a Dr Pepper, and that's it." And I was like, she was, and it was like, oh, light bulb went off. Okay, that's probably why I'm dizzy in practice. Like, that's all I've had. I didn't know any better, like I
Yeah.
had not been taught. So it
Mm.
just, when you don't know what you don't know, and sugar
No.
tastes good. So it's
Yeah.
just, you got to educate a little bit.
Yeah. Education is everything, and it's baby steps.
Mm-hmm.
Not
Mm-hmm.
it's not
Baby
about being
steps. Yeah.
perfect right out the gate.
No.
It's they're gonna, and especially if you have, like, I'd say, like, age at probably 8 and up is really
Mm-hmm.
where they can start. You kind of like educate them, and then you're like, hey, well, if you really want to have it, then have it. But you bring that awareness,
Yeah.
and then they
Yeah.
start to realize, like, oh yeah, mom, my stomach kind of feels, I can't
Uh-huh.
sleep real well. They start to then, and then when they can make their own decisions, oh my gosh, it
Yes.
makes your life so much
Yes.
easier.
Yes. You're like, okay, it's all yours now. I've taught you. At least I know I've sown some seeds for them to grab onto and grow in their lives. So it's not always about just taking away or limiting, especially if you start when your kids are older, that can be really hard.
Mhm.
But because they'll resent it. But you can teach and you can throw little nuggets of wisdom to them throughout, when they're eating different things and set the example yourself,
Yeah,
too. They're watching you.
absolutely. Well, I think too, when you mentioned the word resentment, I want to just kind of call that out for a second, because I think initially that can kind of be the reaction, but
Right.
we have to, if any of you are kind of going through this right now or kind of see this possibly coming up, it's something you want to work on. We have to work on, instead of focusing on that maybe initial resentment, it's not about doing a 180. It's about slow
Right.
baby steps. It's about educating them, starting to let them make their choices. It will get better in time, and then they start to
Yes.
realize, wow, I am feeling better. A lot of
Yes.
times, with teenagers are dealing with like anxiety, they're feeling super stressed, right? All the things.
Right.
And when you start to get them to make healthier choices, and you can bring awareness, but a lot of times they need you to reflect back to them like a coach,
Right.
right? Like,
Yes. Yes.
are you notice, like, it's like the little tiny wins. And when they start to recognize that, then that resentment turns into like gratitude eventually. It just may not
Yes.
happen
Yes. It can
overnight.
take time. You have to give it time. And Lord knows with teenagers, they're going to hold on to that
Hmm.
rebellious. Like
Yeah.
sometimes they're just going to push those boundaries. And sometimes I think you're drinking that Gatorade just to get under my skin, child. I mean, they
Yeah.
know, but I know that eventually they're going to embrace that knowledge and see the connection. And I've watched that play out, especially with my 17-year-old daughter. She's just very health conscious. And, it's been rewarding to watch. Wasn't always a fan of everything I do. Now she's like, what healthy meal is tonight? Like, can I go
Yeah.
walking with you? They grab onto those habits that they see you
They
do.
do.
And, so it just, time, and don't ever estimate those little changes because they do compound over time. They really do. It doesn't have to be overwhelming, one thing at a time, you
Yeah,
know?
absolutely. Okay, Jill, our last thing we have to mention quickly is movement in kids, because
Yes.
movement is, we all know that obviously movement's my jam. I'm the first one to tell people to get
Yes.
moving. A little bit can go a long way. But kids, and I wish I had a solution for this too, with kids sitting in chairs.
Right.
I feel like it's a catch-22. I'm like, my kids are like middle school and up now. So it's like they get to switch classrooms. And so they're probably getting a little bit more movement, but yet they don't have recess, right? So in elementary, they're getting
Exactly.
outside, weather permitting, of course. But I
Yes.
wish we had a better solution for classroom and kids and moving. And we know that a
I
lot of
do
times
too.
we actually can, we can think and focus better with a little movement. And I know I feel like I've heard a little
Absolutely.
bit of some some education that is starting to catch on to this and letting kids like even just standing. But again,
Yes.
I don't know if that's helpful. But anyway, what is your perspective on movements within, for kids and
Right.
the
Well,
school
for
system?
me, just in my work with children as a therapist, as a speech therapist, we worked closely with occupational therapists. And so much of what occupational therapy would recommend for the child was they need to be moving so they can learn. And so those kids that are struggling with the sensory issue, I mean, just coming from a therapist point of view, it was always movement that was, certain movements, certain things would get children's brains operating the way we wanted them to instead of shutting down, right? So I would often incorporate some of that into my speech therapy sessions because they would grab on what I was teaching because they were on a bounce ball or an exercise ball, balancing themselves. But even just the slightest movement can make such a huge change just from a therapeutical, standpoint for me. But I mean, the studies are there, like that. It is not hidden. The CDC recommends 60 minutes of activity a day for school kids, and 24% of them are getting that. That's the latest study that I read when I was researching. But that is a problem. Your mind, your emotions, everything operates better when you're getting enough movement. So I definitely see it as a problem. I don't know what the solution is, but
Yeah. I like the
it
little
is a
wiggle
problem.
chairs. I see the
Uh-huh.
elementary near us, they do have them like for like when the teacher brings up like a small group of kids, they have the little like orange, like kind of wobbly chair. So it's a flat
Uh-huh.
chair on top, but it
Uh-huh.
kind of has a
It kind
little
of
to kind of
gives them
balance
that.
a little bit.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And so I'm like, wait, we have that there. Okay, that's a step in the right direction. That's
Right.
what kids should be sitting in. But then again, I'm also like, maybe some kids are too fidgety with it and it's a distraction. And I don't,
Yes, it's hard when you have a whole classroom. It can be
yeah,
very difficult. And I know just from a teacher's perspective, I know that can be really hard.
yeah.
I've heard of like teachers teaching and then having dance breaks, throughout the day. I
Mhm.
love that. I love that. I mean,
Yes.
just anything little like that, 5 minutes that you can incorporate into your lessons that requires movement.
Mhm.
As a speech therapist, I always found myself trying to get creative. We would play games. We might play catch in between practicing our speech words, like I always wanted them up and moving, or you do this, you can jump on the trampoline for 5 seconds. And then you do this, and like you can get creative with incorporating
Yeah.
movement, bring a rebounder into the class. I don't know if that's safe. I don't know what the school rules are. So y'all just ignore me if that doesn't make sense. But, I'm like looking around, like, what could you do with kids? The
Mhm.
dance breaks, the whatever. But it doesn't have to be a lot to add up to eventually at least get them close to that 60-minute
Mhm.
recommendation to be healthier. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And
yeah.
then when they're home, get them moving, get them
And
in.
parents, yes, can help
Yes,
too.
it's
Yes,
it is amazing what movement does for the brain. And it's
it is
interesting as
true.
as you're talking and like with the speech therapy stuff, I'm thinking with what I teach to women to help to heal their bodies, we're doing it. It's really what we're doing is we're training their muscular, fascial, nervous system and brain, but with movement because it's very brain centered thought
Right.
focus,
That's
but
cool.
with the movement, right? So
Right.
it's so interesting. Like, so all of you listening, you thought you were doing movement, and really you're just training your brain and your body. That's it.
I love
Like,
it. I love it. That's awesome.
awesome, Jill. So, okay, I know we're kind of hitting our time here. I want to wrap up, but I this has been so good, and hopefully everyone listening, like it's just, sometimes it can seem like a lot and it's just picking that one thing that you're like, okay, this piece resonates with me. I can do that. Maybe it's just helping to decrease the amount of
Yes.
sugar your kids are eating or cutting the dye or something simple like that to start with, right? Or getting them moving
Right.
a little bit more.
Yes.
But
Hmm.
I love this, Jill. This has been so great. So can
Yes.
you
Thank you.
share with everyone where they can find out more about, your Rowe Casa, products and you reach out to you if they have any questions?
Yes. So you can always visit our website, rowecasaorganics.com. We have a Facebook group that main page that's just called Rowe Casa Organics, and then a Rowe Casa Organics VIP, which is a very interactive group with thousand plus members. So
Wow.
you can glean, like customer testimonies on that group, things like that. So that's kind of a customer favorite to jump in because you can post and interact. And we've got an Instagram account at Rowe _Casa _Organics. and we have a lot of other ones too, but those are the main ones. That's where you can find us. I'm on Facebook. My sister, who is the co-owner that I get to do this with, is on Instagram because we were like, we can only handle one platform at a time. And so we kind of
Yeah.
tag team the platforms so that we can actually have time with our families. But yeah, so that's where you can find us.
Awesome. Well, Jill, thank you so much for this amazing conversation. And thank you for
Thank
all
you.
the work that you're doing to help offer awesome, healthier products for people.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.